Despite having one of the least popular tax plans in history, Donald Trump is doubling down on his strategy. Just a few days ago, he spoke at the World Economic Forum saying this:
"We're going to pass the largest tax cut in American history, including massive tax cuts for workers and family, and big tax cuts for domestic producers and manufacturers. And we're working with the Democrats on getting an extension of the original Trump tax cuts, as you probably know."
But it looks like Republicans are having a hard time justifying the ridiculous things that Trump says.
How about just no tax? You could do that. You know, if the tariffs work out like I think, a thing like that could happen, if you want to know the truth. You know, years ago, 1870 to 1913, we didn't have an income tax. What we had is tariffs.
And some strategists are flat out saying this is nonsense. Before we get into it, like the video if you're liking the video, and double check that you're subscribed. While some Americans might be tempted by the idea of no tax on tips or no tax at all,
as I said in my speech last week, instead of taxing our citizens to enrich foreign nations, we should be tariffing and taxing foreign nations to enrich our citizens. Does that make sense, right?
No, it doesn't make sense. I mean, putting aside that tariffs are a tax on our citizens, these ideas of doing no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, no tax on income at all, while they sound like they would be good ideas to somebody who doesn't know how government works, in reality, it's more like a spoonful of sugar situation. But instead of the medicine going down, it's literal arsenic. Trump's tax plan, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, was incredibly unpopular, historically unpopular. Less popular than when Clinton and H.W. Bush raised taxes, and for good reason. Here's a chart from 2018, so just after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed, that shows the distribution of benefits to the various quintiles of wage earners here. And you can see that the poorest people, making under $25,000 a year, get 1% of the benefits, while people who make over $150,000 get 65% of the benefits. And out of that 65%, 20%, meaning 20% of the total amount of benefits, went to the top 1%. People who make over $700,000 a year. Here's a chart showing the distribution of the effects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from 2019. So a year after the chart we previously looked at and 2 years after the act was passed. While the chart we just looked at was tracking the benefits of the act itself, this is tracking the change in after-tax income. So if we look at the lowest quintile, people making under $25,000 a year, you can see that they only received a 0.4% increase in their after-tax income, a change of $60. Whereas the top quintile, people making over $150,000 a year, saw a nearly 3% increase in their after-tax income, averaging out at around $7,640. But looking a little deeper, we can see that the top 95% received a stunning 4% increase in after-tax income, with the top 0.1% seeing a 2.7% increase, totaling almost $200,000. Mind you, this is in 2019. So let's fast forward another 4 years. Here's data from October of 2024, just a few months ago. You can see that the bottom 20% in the long run will see less than 0.05% increase in their income after taxes. Whereas the top 1%, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was the top 0.1%, see a 5.4% increase in the long run of their income after taxes. And what these MAGA brain morons seem to not understand is that when the rich pay less in taxes, one of two things happen. Either the poor pay more, or the government has to cut spending. That might seem like a good idea if you hate the government, but cutting spending means no food and water protections. It means not building utilities out in the rural areas. It means children not getting school lunches. You cut enough of those things and the entire thing falls apart. And while the simpletons in MAGA land seem to long for their lives as peasants, there are still Republicans with their heads screwed on tight enough to understand that this isn't going to work. If they try to make their tax cuts permanent for the rich, they can't also cut taxes for the poor. Maybe that's why this economist and budget policymaker, Brian Riedl, said that Hill Republicans are spending so much effort building a spending tax package to reduce the net cost of the TCJA, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and possible state and local tax expansion. I cannot imagine there being much appetite to then blow their deficit numbers back up with this nonsense. He's referring to this post by Richard Rubin that says, Trump, speaking to House Republicans, emphasizes no tax on tips, but also reiterates campaign promises on removing taxes from Social Security benefits and overtime pay. We're working very hard to get them done. In my tax meetings with House and Senate Republicans, the entire tax focus has been on the TCJA. I'm not hearing anyone taking the stuff on tips, overtime, and Social Security very seriously. Oh, so wouldn't you know it, the actual swamp monsters are dragging their feet when it comes to cutting taxes for poor people while they're working overtime, pun intended, to make the tax cuts they gave to the rich permanent. This is going to be yet another populist campaign promise that Donald Trump said he was going to do during the campaign and absolutely could not deliver. It's going to be hilarious watching MAGA trying to spin this as either the Democrats' fault or something that Trump never really said in the first place. But the funny part is that the Republican Party has no power over Donald Trump. If House and Senate Republicans dragging their feet becomes a problem for the MAGA base, Trump is going to do everything in his power to force them to make those tax cuts. If they make those tax cuts without raising taxes on the rich, there will be a massive deficit in government spending, which could trigger all kinds of problems. So personally, I think we need to keep an eye on this. Hold Trump to his promises, make those tax cuts for the poor, and force them to either raise taxes on the rich or finally face the music on the smoke and mirrors they've been doing since the Reagan era.
In fact, the richest 25 people paying less in income tax than most American workers, and all of it legal. Tonight, the outrage and renewed calls to level the playing field. Here's Terry Moran.
The numbers revealed in the report from the investigative group ProPublica are staggering. In 2007, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos made $3.8 billion. But Bezos, now the richest man in the world, paid nothing, not a dime, in federal income taxes that year. Same story for Tesla billionaire Elon Musk in 2018. Investment icon Warren Buffett says he supports higher taxes for the rich.
The wealthy are definitely undertaxed.
And he too has benefited. Between 2014 and 2018, Buffett made a whopping $24.3 billion. But over those years, he paid just $23.7 million in federal income taxes, an infinitesimal percentage of the money he made.
Families have to pay their tax bills regularly, but the billionaires have found a way to avoid that.
ProPublica found nothing illegal. Its investigation focused only on federal income taxes, which are largely based on wages and salaries. But these billionaires make most of their money from investments, which have long been given preferential treatment, not from salaries. And that skewers the federal tax code towards the wealthy.
So if they wanted to up and get rid of income tax, the wealthiest of the wealthy would only see like a 0.1% increase in the wealth, while most Americans could really use that 10 to 37%. So this is just another example of Trump blowing hot air. The trick here is that the House and Senate Republicans are not on his side when it comes to this. So I think this is an opportunity for the Democrats to hold his foot to the fire. He said no income tax, let's do no income tax. Let's see what other kind of tax we can come up with that makes them pay their fair share. I'm Tony Hinderman with Really American, and I'll catch you next time.